What kind of person can lead a seemingly normal life while carrying out a reign of terror spanning decades? The case of Gary Ridgway, infamously known as the Green River Killer, remains one of the most chilling examples of how a predator can hide in plain sight. Ridgway, one of America's most prolific serial killers, confessed to murdering at least 71 women during the 1980s and 1990s, though investigators believe the true number could be higher. His crimes were marked by meticulous planning and cold execution, targeting young women and sex workers in Washington state. His methods were calculated, his demeanor unassuming, and his ability to evade capture for so long speaks to the complexity of his crimes and the challenges law enforcement faced in bringing him to justice. Ridgway's story is a testament to the importance of forensic advancements and the tireless dedication of investigators who refused to let his victims be forgotten. Ridgway's killing spree began in the early 1980s, when bodies of young women started appearing along the banks of the Green River in the Seattle-Tacoma area. Many of the victims were sex workers or runaways, vulnerable individuals often overlooked by society, making them easy prey for a predator like Ridgway. These women were offered a ride in his pickup truck, where he presented himself as non-threatening and unremarkable. Once in his vehicle, Ridgway would gain their trust by chatting casually, only to turn violent when they were isolated. He would strangle his victims with his hands or a ligature, such as a rope or a piece of clothing, often watching their faces as they took their last breaths. Ridgway later admitted that strangling allowed him to feel a sense of control over his victims, a key aspect of his psychological profile. After murdering his victims, he would dispose of their bodies in remote wooded areas or near the Green River, earning him the infamous moniker. What set Ridgway apart from many other killers was his grotesque habit of returning to the dump sites to engage in necrophilia with the corpses. He admitted to revisiting his victims' remains until decomposition made it impossible. This behavior revealed not just a deep-seated need for dominance, but also a horrifying lack of humanity. Ridgway also deliberately scattered the remains across multiple locations to confuse investigators, often moving body parts to different areas. Despite these horrific acts, Ridgway led what appeared to be a normal life. He worked steadily as a truck painter for over 30 years, maintaining a stable job and earning the trust of his co-workers. He was married multiple times, and by all outward appearances, seemed to be a devoted husband. Neighbors described him as polite, quiet, and ordinary, a man who could easily blend into his community without raising suspicion. This duality made him particularly dangerous and allowed him to continue killing undetected for decades. The investigation into the Green River murders was one of the most exhaustive in U.S. history, involving hundreds of detectives, thousands of leads, and years of painstaking work. The case officially began in 1982, when the bodies of 5 women were discovered near the Green River within weeks of each other. These early discoveries sent shockwaves through the community, but the lack of witnesses or clear evidence left investigators struggling for leads. Over the years, Ridgway was questioned multiple times. In 1983, police identified him as a potential suspect after witnesses reported seeing his truck near areas where victims were last seen. Despite this, he managed to pass a polygraph test in 1984, a tool that was less reliable than initially believed. Investigators also collected hair and saliva samples from Ridgway, but the forensic technology of the time couldn't definitively link him to the murders. The task force faced immense public pressure as the body count grew, with criticism mounting over the lack of progress. The turning point came in the late 1990s, when DNA technology had advanced significantly. Forensic scientists were now able to analyze degraded samples and extract DNA profiles with incredible accuracy, something that had been impossible during the initial investigation. Detectives revisited the evidence collected during the early 1980s, including semen samples recovered from several of the victims. Using polymerase chain reaction, or PCR, a technique that amplifies DNA, forensic experts reanalyzed these samples. In 2001, investigators finally had their breakthrough. DNA found on 3 victims, Marcia Chapman, Opal Mills, and Carol Christensen, matched Ridgway's saliva sample, which had been stored for nearly 2 decades. This match was definitive, with the statistical likelihood of the DNA belonging to someone else being astronomically low. Armed with this irrefutable evidence, authorities moved quickly to arrest Ridgway. On November 30th, 2001, he was apprehended outside the truck painting company, where he had worked for decades. The arrest marked the end of a reign of terror that had haunted Washington state for years and brought relief to a community that had lived in fear for far too long. The advancements in DNA technology not only solved the case, but also underscored the critical importance of preserving evidence, even when the odds of solving a case seem insurmountable. Ridgway's arrest shocked those who knew him. To his family and co-workers, he was a mild-mannered, hard-working man. But to investigators, he was a calculating predator who used his ordinary appearance as a shield. During his interrogation, Ridgway admitted to killing at least 71 women, though he was only charged with 48 confirmed murders. His confessions revealed a man who viewed his victims as disposable, blaming them for their own deaths due to their lifestyles. Forensic psychologists described Ridgway as a textbook psychopath, manipulative, emotionally detached, and driven by an insatiable need for control. His gruesome habits and lack of remorse shocked even seasoned investigators. During his trial, prosecutors presented overwhelming evidence, including DNA matches, victim testimonies, and his own chilling admissions. In 2003, Ridgway struck a plea deal, avoiding the death penalty in exchange for his full cooperation. This allowed law enforcement to recover the remains of several more victims and provide closure to their families. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The case of the Green River Killer serves as a reminder of the dangers hidden in plain sight. Ridgway's ability to lead a double life for so long raises haunting questions about how society can better identify and stop predators like him. How did he manage to fool everyone around him? And how many more lives could have been saved if forensic technology had been more advanced in the 1980s? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more in-depth, true crime stories.